In this video, we'll look at inflation and find out what's behind quantitative easing by the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank. Let's get started with the definition of quantitative easing. An unconventional monetary policy used by some central banks to stimulate their economy. But why does our economy need stimulating? And how is this supposed to stimulate it? The Federal Reserve of the United States, our central bank, tells us that the deflation of asset prices are hurting our economy. The purpose of quantitative easing, therefore, is to inflate asset prices. Which prices have been deflating in recent years? Not gold.
Maybe gold's going to 10,000.
Silver.
New 31-year high for silver today.
Or oil.
Oil is likely to move higher for a variety of reasons.
Housing prices. Those have been falling. But why have they fallen? Americans can't afford these expensive houses. But Ben Bernanke doesn't want prices to go down, no. God forbid the average American can afford a home and live the American dream in today's global society. Ben Bernanke says, the U.S. government has a technology called a printing press. Under a paper money system, a determined government can always generate higher spending and hence positive inflation. In other words, the Federal Reserve is meddling in what could be a free market. In a true free market, there should be less confusion and speculation on what is to come in the future. Some people say quantitative easing is just printing money, but it is not. It is printing money and then buying treasuries from banks such as Goldman Sachs.
Here you go.
What happens if the Federal Reserve was not buying treasuries? In the past, Americans and foreign governments bought more U.S. treasuries. Today, they buy a lot less, and the Federal Reserve is buying a lot more. The Federal Reserve announced the first round, called QE1, on November 25, 2008, with plans to purchase government-sponsored enterprise debt of $100 billion and mortgage-backed securities of $500 billion. But the Fed then increased the size of their purchases on March 18, 2009 to $200 billion and $1.25 trillion respectively. The next round of QE takes effect on June 30, 2011. Hold on! What is quantitative easing again? Why does it need to keep happening? A good way to summarize quantitative easing is as follows. Quantitative easing attempts to lower long-term interest rates, keep them low for a fairly well-understood period of time, while flooding the economy with cash in an effort to boost consumption and investment. If you watching this are an average American, you have no idea why the Federal Reserve is doing this, again disrupting the free market economy with this quantitative easing. A free market advocate, Ron Paul, congressman from Texas, has been fighting to end the Federal Reserve or at least audit it for many years.
It's an overall audit of everything the Fed does, and it will prove our point. It will prove our point that there's a lot of shenanigans going on in the Federal Reserve that deserve attention.
Maybe if we could see exactly what the Federal Reserve was doing and had some oversight from our elected officials, we could make better choices as a nation. So far, the choices of the Federal Reserve for decades, especially since going off the gold standard, have produced inflation in prices, which is deflating the value of the US dollar. The dollar has been losing traction against other currencies, for example, reaching even with the Canadian dollar during the economic crash of 2007, and now today from its recent high, May 14, 2004, when $1 equaled 1.4 Canadian dollars. This devaluing of the dollar punishes those who save money and hurts those on fixed incomes. Thank you, Social Security. Fiat money has ended with inflationary disaster many times, including the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s, Hungary after World War II, Zimbabwe in the last decade.
The Zimbabwean dollar is now worthless.
If you need soap, you have to change with gold. Everything is gold, no Zimbabwean dollars.
And on and on. How can we be sure this won't happen in the United States? We can't. It is now too late.
Today, in a situation where people are flocking to gold and leaving the dollar, what does that say about the status of our currency? What does it say about the status of our country? What if people no longer had faith in paper money and carried around anything but dollar bills in their pocket?
We have had the world's reserve currency since 1944. Other countries would trade in US dollars for things such as oil, but that has been changing in recent times. China and Russia recently agreed to trade in their own respective currencies from now on. A few months after Saddam Hussein trumpeted his decision to sell oil in euros instead of US dollars, the Americans and British invaded Iraq. If the US dollar ceases to be the world reserve currency, at the same time the Federal Reserve is quantitatively easing, we are in for a major crisis, if not what the future will call World War III. Keep your eye on the global financial system and end the Federal Reserve's manipulation of our currency for the benefit of global bankers. Return America back to a sound money system and free market capitalism so that we can once again prosper as a great nation with the spirit many of us still hold.